Having an exceptional relationship with your spouse affects every single aspect of your life and is crucial for experiencing your dream life together. I'm Rob Murgatroyd.
And I'm Kim Murgatroyd. Listen in on our honest, filter-free conversations as we navigate life and business together without killing each other.
You'll learn by osmosis how to transform the friction you feel in your relationship into a purposeful foundation that will allow you to grow together.
Welcome to the Friday Podcast.
Kimberly Puglia Murgatroyd, how are you?
Oh, I'm Puglia Murgatroyd today.
Puglia Murgatroyd. Can you spell Puglia?
P-U-G-L-I-A. Do you know where Puglia is?
Germany.
So for everybody playing along in the geography game today, Puglia is if Italy is a boot, the shape of Italy looks like a boot. Puglia is the heel of said boot.
If Italy was a boot, what brands would the boot be?
I think it depends on who you ask. I'm going to go with Ferragamo.
Yeah, I think if you're in Tuscany, it's going to be Ferragamo. And if you're in Rome, it's going to be Gucci. And if you're in Sicily, it doesn't matter because they're just going to kick you in the head with it. But that is not why we're here today. We are here to help couples solve their financial issues because I am...
this should be fun.
There's a guy out there, I think his name is Dave Ramsey, and he's got nothing on me when it comes to his savviness.
Oh, wow.
On debt reduction and savings and all things cheap, all things financially savvy. You see that I used the word cheap there. We're going to get into why I chose that word. But you and I, as much as we love each other from such a, it's like when you listen to Esther. If you don't listen to Esther Hicks, you should. She says, "We love you so much." you know when you hear that
She's about to put the hammer down.
About to put the hammer down, but honey, you know that I love you.
I do.
You know that there's a deep respect that I have for you. But we have a little bit of a difference when it comes to how we approach finances. And the F word, there's a little...
That's an F word in our family.
There's a little hesitation that I have when I get the finances coming out. But let me set it up for you.
Okay.
So we have two different parents. And we have two different ways that we were raised. My mom's name is Cecile. And you're shaking. You don't even want to mention your mother. I
don't like to talk about my family like that on here.
All right. So how do we talk about our family without?
We were just raised very differently.
Yeah.
In respect to money, and so when you have two people that get together, listen. What do people fight over, right? What do they say people divorce over? The number one thing, it's finances. Mm-hmm. And so when you have people that are raised in different ways in regards to finances and money, you have very different opinions. And if you're sharing one bank account and, everything's going in the one pot, then it can cause a lot of issues. And so that is the situation that we found ourselves in, isn't it?
It isn't it. So, okay. Let's start. I'm gonna start first because I can sense the trepidations you have around.
I don't have any trepidations. I'm just not. I don't want to talk about my family on here. That's all.
Well, if you don't want to talk about your family, how are we going to talk about how we were raised differently?
No, we can do that.
Okay. So I was raised that you just spent it. If you made it, you spent it. And I remember my dad saying to me, as I'm thinking about this, I'm remembering a couple of different things. One comes to mind where he would always comment on how he hated cheap people, right? So, if he went out to dinner and he didn't pick up the tab, he viewed that as, disrespectful. Even if he went out to dinner with 20 people and they all certainly could have chipped in, he was the guy that would sneak away and pay the bill because he wanted I think it was my guess was it was more of a validation for his ego than it was anything else, right? It was his way of this is my words, but sort of his way of not feeling like a blue collar worker who couldn't afford it. And it was his way of feeling like he had the cash to be able to do it. Instead of, hey, we're going out with 6 other couples or 4 other couples or whatever it is, and we should all split it. Made no sense. I remember he loved the television show The Honeymooners, and Ralph Cramden, the lead guy on that, used to say, I had it and I spent it. And that was his mentality. So lucky for him, there was a pension that was in place. And for however much money he made as a truck driver per hour, they took a pretty significant chunk of it and put it into a pension. And so as a result, he wound up retiring with a lot of cash. But if he did not have that, he would have retired broke. There's no question around it. Is that how you were raised?
So I was raised by 2 teachers who my mother grew up with 7 brothers and sisters, and in a time that, you had to be frugal. And her family in the early days didn't have a ton of additional money. They actually would bring in foster children, and they were really giving and caring. But money wasn't a plentiful thing. And so my mother learned to be very frugal. And when I grew up, I'm not going to say my parents are 100% not cheap. There's no part about them that is cheap. They actually hate cheap as well. So we can see eye to eye on that. But they were, I would use the word smart with their money. They bought cars when they had cash. They made a great investment in the house. They did a lot of things when they had cash. They weren't in credit debt. They were very smart, I think, with their money on that side. We did not buy fancy things. In fact, fun fact, when Rob and I started dating, we went to Los Angeles and he drove down Rodeo Drive, and I had never seen these stores and I didn't even know what they were called. And he literally drove slowly and taught me to say and pronounce each of the stores. And I truly had never seen it. We just didn't grow up like that. I grew up in New Hampshire, and we didn't have, or if we did have those stores, I didn't know where they were. I surely saw them in Boston, but it didn't register on my radar. It just wasn't a thing in my family. And when I went into stores, I always looked at the sale rack first. If I couldn't find it on the sale rack, then, I might go somewhere else. But I think that for me, that need to be frugal was definitely high. I was told save. The one regret that I wish I was taught about, I was talking to a friend yesterday whose father raised her to make smart investments where the money made money. I didn't get that advice because I had 2 school teachers for parents. I don't think they knew that, They knew saving, and they said, don't overspend and save. And so that's what I was raised with. Don't overspend and save. And so that's what I did. I always bought things on sale. I always looked for sales, and all of that. But I think, that's the basics, right? So you were brought up to spend. I was brought up to save. And in that are good and bad. And this is what you and we've been together almost 2 decades, and we've had to deal with a lot of money issues. And we're going to talk in a minute about how we kind of have compromised on our financial blueprints. But first, it took acknowledging your financial blueprint is your own, and it's not necessarily right or wrong. It's just your financial blueprint. There can always be changes that can be made. So I think that was the first thing we had to do, was acknowledge that we were just raised differently, and each has good. Like for you, it's easier for you to come from a place of abundance because you're just willing to spend. And so you don't think about the lack or like that you don't have the money. You probably spend it and then worry about it later, but you don't worry about it at the time. And so you live in a more of a vibration, I think, of abundance in the mindset. You'll always make more. If you make it, you spend it. You always make more, right? Whereas inherently, when you are thrifty and penny pinching and trying to get the best deal, sometimes that can have an inherent lack. And so you and I talk a lot about your mindset and vibration. And I think when the thriftiness comes from a place of lack, I think that's not a great thing.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I'm thinking about. We're fortunate in that we have amazing friends, and some of those friends are extremely wealthy. And as I'm thinking about these friends, and if you're listening, don't think I'm talking about you directly, because I'm going to disguise it and mess it up so that you can't tell exactly who it is that I'm talking about. So don't call me and say, I heard you talk about me on the podcast, because I'm not. It's not you. You're so vain. You think this song is about you. So I have a couple of friends. And one of them, I'm going to put them in order of richest. And one of them will really, really look at the cost of everything. And if there's anybody who does not, quote, need to, it would be him. And it sort of tortures him to think of overspending in an area that he could do with something that was good enough. You know what I mean?
Give an example.
An example is, okay, this is somebody who, if we have a conversation about, let's say, travel, he will make a decision about whether or not he is going to fly in a higher class of service based on factors like, well, how many hours is it going to take me to get there? If it's going to be 5 hours, I'll be fine in coach. But if it's going to be like 6 or more, it's just not worth it. Now, this is when I tell you that this number that it would cost for this particular person to fly in a business versus coach would be a minuscule fraction of his wealth. Okay, so it's probably the equivalent of you saying, should I spend $100 or $200? Right? It is certainly
for this person,
for this particular person. It is not going to be that much of a difference. So he would never go out and buy custom suits. There's no reason that he would spend $2, $3, $4, or whatever $1,000 on suits when he has a T-shirt that works just fine. There's no reason for him to do that. But the way that he lives is extremely well. The way that he takes time off to travel is extremely abundant, or what's that word? The opposite of conservative, free flowing. What's the word? Generous. Mm-hmm.
He takes a lot of time to travel.
Takes a lot of time to travel. Now, I have another friend who is not quite as wealthy, but still has plenty of money. And if I have a conversation with him or her about something where I'll make a random example. Oh, you should subscribe to that person's extra bonus content. And they'll say, well, how much is it? And I'll be like, let's use Spotify as an example. You should subscribe to Spotify. It's really, really good. You can get it. Well, but how much is it? It's $10 a month. Yeah, but can't I just get those songs on the internet? Why do I need to pay that monthly? And in my brain, I cannot for the life of me understand why we wasted 3 minutes of conversation around something that will cost $60 for the year. But what I realized is that it's not the Spotify. It is the filter of all the Spotifys. It's the filter of all the things that hit the windshield of life that you have to make decisions on. Do I need to paint this room? Do I need to do the Spotify? Do I need to, and all of those things. Now, again, he is somebody that will stay in the best of the best of the best when
So
he travels.
this is for clarity. The first person, the richest friend you had, was frugal on what he was frugal on. The second richest friend you have is won't pay for Spotify, but will stay in super high-end hotels. So you and I have a saying that we say all the time, and you're going to tell me where it comes from because I don't know. But people spend money on what they spend money on.
It comes from my friend Dave, and one day we were talking about it, and I was like, this guy's telling me that he doesn't have any cash, but he just bought a $3 million house. And he just matter-of-factly one day said to me, people spend money on what they spend money on.
Well, and so to go back to my parents, right? Because I think this is a big, this is a part of it, I think, that's worth talking about. My parents, although we leaned into the sale rack and those kinds of things, we also spent money on a lot of travel, and shocking where I came from, right? So my parents were experiences over things people, for sure. Your parents, I think, were experiences and things people, and they would just spend. And when you if we get back to where we started with this conversation, it's how you and I came from different money blueprints. And, you look, you can have all the friends in the world that have tons of money, and you're going to have the people that have all the money in the world and only wear the black t-shirt. And then you're going to have other people that have all the money in the world and they wear custom everything. I think it is what it is. But how you and I can relate and overcome our issues with money, because I remember early in the years when I first met you, this is true story. Demi, the oldest, was little. She was 6 years old and she grew out of her pajamas. And I said, okay, so Demi needs new pajamas. Let's head over to Target. And you were like, what's that? I can't make this up, okay? It's not like Target was new. It was across the street from his house. And I said, well, where do you go to get her pajamas? He's like, Neiman Marcus. I went, I'm sorry. How much are you paying for her pajamas? And you're like, I don't know. Rob literally wouldn't look at the price tag. He would just take the pajamas he liked, put them on the counter, pay the pajamas. And then when the bill came, he'd pay the bill on the credit card. I know you didn't even know how much you were paying for it, because if you saw the price tag, if either of those two friends that you just talked about saw the price tag you paid for your 5-year-old's pajamas,
they'd pass out.
They would unfriend you.
They wouldn't be friends.
They would not be friends with you.
We wouldn't be allowed to be friends anymore.
So I literally took Rob by the hand, walked him across the street and said, this is Target. You can get clothing here. And because your child grows like a weed and she's going to need new pajamas every 3 months, and you can get them for $14, let's do that. And so this is how our money mindset collisions began to happen.
Now, I've got another friend who is probably, of the other two I've mentioned, he's the one with the lowest amount of money, but still has plenty of cash, okay? He is the opposite of all of them. He is the one that spends at a level that I've never seen anybody spend, and saves and invests and travels very well. So he is absolutely, if he's going to fly somewhere, it's going to be first class. If he he's not pinching on anything. I remember being in the bar with him one night, and he ran into some girl who she was with her mom, and her mom's has some foundation that she's working on, and he just walked right over and just gave her a check for a bunch of money to help out with her cause. So he is somebody who has such an abundance mindset that he does not have any lack. He buys himself exactly what it is that he wants. He does not think twice about it. And money continually comes to him at scale. So he's an opposite example, and I wish I had him here now, because he'd be a great conversation to have about this, because he does not think, or this is my impression anyway, he does not, I think I'm going to put the word worry. He does not worry at all about spending money. In fact, if you were around him, you would say, this guy, he fucking spends. Like, he is a spender. But it hasn't hurt him. And it has, in many ways, that abundance mentality that he has brought him so many things. And he's on the uptick of his life. Like, he is, he's beginning to build companies and scale. And he is the opposite of my other two friends. So, money's an interesting thing.
So what do you get from all that?
I don't know.
Like I said,
I don't know. That's what I'm bringing it up for. It's
so
an interesting conversation.
Let's bring it back to you and I, and let's bring it back to how people, because our point today is to help our listener hear how you can have two totally different money mindsets. And so I think it's great that you have these three friends and they all have different ways of doing it. So there's no perfect way to do it, right? There's, like I said, there's no, just because I was raised a bit more frugal, you were raised a bit more lax, or a lot more lax in spending, that it's not that I'm right or you're right. The reality is that there's something in the middle that is right for you and for your family. And so here's what I had to do. I had to come, because I could sense that my wanting to save and find things that are less expensive, I would do it at the cost of quality. So I would say, okay, well, I'll just get this instead of that because it's cheaper, when I know that that shit's going to fall apart way faster. But I would do it to save the $5. Mm-hmm. And I think that, for me, I had to look at and go, okay, well, why am I doing that? I'm doing it to save the $5. Why is the $5 that more important? Because here's what I came to as my reality, is that for me, I'd buy the cheaper thing because I was programmed to buy the cheaper thing, but I'm going to have to rebuy this thing again in 3 months because I didn't buy the more expensive one that would actually not fall apart. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, my being more frugal and wanting to save actually was going to cost me more money. So I had to examine that and look at it. And then another thing is, we were driving to Mississippi for an event like 10 years ago. And it was a long drive. And so Rob said, I have a book. He likes to trap me when we get in the car. And he forces podcasts and different things on me. And I've learned to just kind of roll with it at this point. But he wanted me to listen to this book that actually the friend you just talked about with the super abundant mindset had recommended. And it is called The Secret of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. And we played this book all the way to Mississippi and all the way back from Mississippi during this drive. And it was cheesy, for sure. But there were so many things in it that triggered me to see where my money mindset was coming from a place of lack and not a place of abundance. So things like statements like money doesn't grow on trees, or, what do you think we're made of? What do you think I am, an ATM? All of these little statements that are part of American vernacular, at least for me growing up, I would hear people say these things, and that creates a money blueprint of lack, coming from a place of lack. And so I had to truly listen. I listened to this book 7 times in a row because I needed to get into my brain that I need to come from a place of abundance. I'm going to be more like your first 2 friends that you talked about, where I am going to make judgment calls on whether or not I want to spend that money, whether it's worth spending the money. Because the last one you talked about, I think sometimes just spends money to spend the money. And it's not necessarily because the quality is better or whatever. I think that there's an excess of spending that doesn't relate to quality. For example, in Italy, an insane bottle of wine is $30. It's a great bottle of wine. In America, that wouldn't work out the same way. But in Italy, it's $30. So you don't need to do it to get an insane bottle of wine. You can get one for $30 or $40 here. And so I'm still going to make that judgment call based on that. Now, what I am going to do different and what I have done different is I reprogrammed my money mindset a bit. And I think it was in that book, but I've read multiple books on this. Also, the Science of Getting Rich, or the Science of Being Rich. It's Wallace Wattles. It was written in 1911.
Great
okay,
book. Yeah, it's a
great
great
book.
book.
So I've done a few of these things, and one of them, what they recommended was to increase your abundant mindset and your money mindset, to take a small bit of money each month and put it aside to just spend and to blow. And do you remember when I used to do this? When I was trying to reprogram my mind, and I had like an envelope, and I would save money all year for our annual trip to Greece. And then I created an envelope and I called it the Dom envelope. And I was committed to buying a bottle of Dom during our trip to Greece that summer. Why? Well, because is it better? Sure. It's probably, a better champagne, of course, but I needed to put myself into the place of having an abundant mindset in relation to money. And that was one of the things that was suggested in the book. And so I created a Dom envelope, and that Dom envelope was to pay for the Dom. And I remember where I was. I remember what night it was. I have a picture of me holding the bottle. And it's interesting when you do the steps required to shift your money mindset into an abundant mindset, and you make a purchase like that. Like I did it here in Italy. We went to Venice, and I bought hand-blown glass wine glasses. We drink wine every night. I love a beautiful wine glass. It was our first family trip. We had just moved here, and I wanted to mark that trip with something that was going to be amazing. And so I bought hand-blown glass wine glasses, way more expensive than I could have totally found wine glasses that were cute, that were cheaper, but I wanted this to be an abundance purchase, and that's how I looked at it. And so that's how I've shifted my money mindset since connecting with you and getting in relationship with you, to be a bit more open and abundant and not coming from a place of lack. And so how have you shifted? You don't even look at a price tag and just purchase everything. How have you shifted maybe a bit more frugal to come into the compromise zone? Because we couldn't live the way I was living, and we couldn't live the way you were living. Like we hit a point one time in our marriage where I changed the Amazon password, and I wouldn't give it to him because he was just buying everything under the sun, and I couldn't control it, and I was freaking out. So I literally changed the password, and I wouldn't let him in. And he had to shift too, so we could compromise on this money mindset, right? So we could come somewhere in the middle.
Well, I think in three ways. As I'm thinking about this as you're talking. I think the first one that you've convinced me of is quality. And so, if you take and by the way, if you're trying to figure out how this can help you, there's a lot of seeds in this conversation. The first seed for me is, people spend money on what they spend money on. So you can't spend money on everything, because if you spend money on everything, you have nothing left, right? So you have to sort of pick and choose what's important to you. So for me, one of the things that was really important to me is clothes. I really, really like clothes. So, I don't need to have a $10 million house. It's not that important to me. I don't need to have a car. It's not that important to me. What is important to me is having great clothes. I really, really like it. So I would much rather spend and because I'm in Italy, I can get an even better deal on it. I would much rather buy a quality custom suit than buying a bunch of, clothes that is inexpensive. So in other words, I'm not looking for volume. I'm looking for quality. So I would say that's the first one.
Well, that's a huge change, because you used to look for volume and quantity.
Mm-hmm. You mean volume and quality?
Yeah.
No. I used to look for volume.
Volume and quantity.
Volume is quantity.
Quantity and quality.
Yeah.
You used to look for quantity and quality. So you would buy a ton of shit that was really high priced, and you'd have a massive amount of really high price shit.
Yeah, I don't think that way anymore. So that's the first one. The second one is from the ego standpoint. The thought of ever, getting a recommendation from a waiter or a sommelier about wine, and then just saying, "Okay, sounds good," or somebody coming over and saying, "Tonight's special is," and saying, "Okay, it sounds good." And asking the price at the table would make me want to crawl under the table. It was so embarrassing to me that, I would be with another couple or even by myself, or, with just my family, asking them, "Okay, well, how much is that fish special?" Mr. Greek guy in Greece.
Market price.
Market price. Okay, well, that's not an answer. How much is the market price, right? Well, it's X number of kilos. Okay, well, I can't do the metric conversion. So how much is it going to cost me for this thing that you're recommending, right? So now I have no problem. And I say, either A, I go into the restaurant and say, I'm looking for a bottle of wine that's somewhere around a $30 price point. And what they'll do is they'll say, I have one for 38. Is that a little too high? Or I have one for 27, right? So the second thing is when they tell me that they're doing a crab pasta or a lobster pasta, I won't just say, yeah, sounds good. I'll say, how much is it?
Okay, can we talk about the fish story from Greece?
The fish story from Greece. Which one? We had so many fish stories.
So before you made this shift, we were in Greece, and the guy was like, so they have fresh fish and it's all by the kilo. And so the guy said, come look at the fish. And you walked over to look at the fish, and the fish ended up being a $350 fish that only 2 people at the table ate. Do you remember this? Mm-hmm. And this is probably what triggered you now asking for the price of things, because you literally don't know what you don't know. You have no clue. And instead of just like, what made you make that shift? Like, because it's not in your nature, and it used to make you embarrassed to ask the price of things. What made you now okay with it? Like, what made that shift?
Well, I think there were constant situations where you were pissed and you were stressed and you were annoyed with things that I, for the life of me at the time, could not understand why those things bothered you. And after enough of those, and being in situations with other friends where and friends certainly with a lot more money than me would have an understanding of, I remember talking to our friend Darren in Greece during that week, and I was like, do you look at the prices? And he's like, yeah, I do. I always do. And I was like, that's interesting. I don't. And there was some weird ego thing where if I'm going out to dinner, I want to go out to dinner and have fun, and I don't want to think about that. And I remember having this, conversation with Darren where we ultimately came to, this is a long answer to this question, but I think it's important. I remember that he and I sort of like went back and forth on this. He's like, well, but I don't understand why you don't think about it. And in the end, what we figured out was I looked and said, okay, look, we're going to be here for a month. We're going to spend $10,000 over the course of the month. It's all going to wash out. I'm not worried about it. And he went, okay, that makes sense. But you are looking at the price, though. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, and I'm making this number up. You're looking at the total cost of the trip is going to be 10 grand, and you're not nickel and diming each dinner because you know how much the whole thing is going to cost you. And so you're staying within that budget. And while he was right, the bigger issue wasn't that. The bigger issue was that there is an awareness of spending, whether it's in the totality of the trip or it's in the singular purchase of the dinner. There's still a focus on price. And, like everything else in life, the first time, couples are interesting, right? Like the first time somebody says something, it's like, oh, she's fucking crazy. But then the second time you hear it and you go, is it me? Then the third time you go, what's wrong with me? Like the fourth time you go, am I a fucking idiot? And then the fifth time you go, oh, I got a problem. And then the sixth time you go, oh, my friends don't do this. So it's like a breadcrumb, right? It's like every time it's just a little bit more of, but it takes willingness to not make everybody else crazy and go, okay, well, I'm doing something that nobody else is doing here. And where does that come from? And I think it comes from a mix of lots of things. It could be insecurities. It could be programming as a kid. It could be, wanting to have an abundance mindset, to not be, or to not want to be perceived as miserly. It's interesting with life because living well is really, really important to me. And when I think about living well, I think about eating in restaurants the way I want to, drinking wine I want to, wearing the clothes I want to, traveling to the places I want to. And when I think about the dollar signs that are associated with those things and trying to find ways to mitigate the things I want, in my mind, it makes me feel, oh, well, then I'm not going to be staying in the hotel I want, drinking the wine I want, eating the food I want, and so therefore I'm not living the life I want. But turning a blind eye to it means you'll never be able to live that life because you won't have any money. But putting too much of an eye on it means that you could never experience a great hotel, or never experience flying first class, or never experiencing a great bottle of wine. So finding the balance of both of those things in your particular situation, is an interesting thing, because I see this with people who friends of mine who have tens of millions of dollars, and like we started at the beginning of this show, are behaving in certain ways. So finding the balance that works for you, I think really requires that you and your partner have these conversations, and they're not fucking easy conversations, because then you start going, but you bought that. But I thought of it different. Like, yes, I did, but I needed I didn't have a coat and you had 8. That's why
okay, that was our most recent one.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so the older I get, the more hesitant I am. And this includes this show. Don't listen to me to give you the 7 steps to blank. What I can do is I can share with you from a teaching standpoint perspectives. And hopefully those perspectives you can filter into your own life and see how this works for you. But I don't think you can be entirely prescriptive of this. I think somebody like a Dave Ramsey can go, if you want to get out of debt, list them, put them in order of lowest amount, and then execute it, because that's a formula. I also think that you got to do what it is for you. Like, if you're doing without, like I'm looking over right now, and I've got this beautiful coat that I can't wait for the temperature to drop, 15 more degrees that I can wear. Because it's cashmere, it's Loro Piano. When I put it on, it feels so good. I feel abundant in it. I feel affluent in it. And I don't want to rob myself of that. I want to experience that where I feel fucking great. But at the same time, I don't want to buy Loro to the point where I'm having to eat, Go ahead. You got your hand up.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I want to comment on that. So here's the difference for me. And couples fight over money. They just do. Couples divorce over money. Couples fight over money. And I don't want that to be us, and I don't want that to be our listener. And when you were just describing that coat, if you were not in the fiscally developed place that you are, meaning that I see you different now. I see you looking at prices. I see you backing down the sommelier and going back into your price range. I see you not buying a shit ton of quantity of cheap clothing and waiting to get that Loro Piano jacket. So when you describe why you want that jacket and that you're going to put that jacket on, I am getting excited for you. I want you to have that jacket. I want to support this habit and desire and the love of this. But I wouldn't be able to if you were also doing the irresponsible things that I deem irresponsible, that for me cross my line and put our family into a financial pickle. That would bother me, because although I have worked on my abundant mindset and I think that there is no end to the money that could come our way, I also know that when bills are due and there's a reality of what's on the other side of that American Express card, that there's time, effort, energy, and stress that go into that number. And some people are willing to take on the stress and the overwhelm to create that number, and I'm not one of them. So I that's for me. I want you to have this, but I'm able to want you to have this array of amazing clothing that you love because you are being fiscally responsible,
and because you are behaving, for lack of a better word, or you are supporting me in that way. It makes me want to be even more careful about every nickel I'm spending because I feel like you're on my team. I feel like you're on Team Kashmir.
And I feel like you're on my team.
Right.
And so for me, I want experiences over things. I just do. And sometimes those experiences are going to be an Airbnb in a random country called Montenegro that is super, weird and off the grid. And sometimes those experiences are going to be in a 5-star resort and they're going to be incredible. Here's what I just realized in this conversation. You and I have both done our work on our money blueprint using T. Harv Eker, using the science of getting rich with Wallace Wattles, and many other, David Bach, Latte Factor, huge. I do want to talk about that. I know you're telling me it's time to go, but I'm going to talk about it regardless because I think it's important. But you and I have done the work to develop a healthy financial blueprint for our family. And that financial blueprint comes down to one thing: quality and price. You and I have both come to, we want the cost that we're paying to be equal to the quality of the item or experience we're having. So you and I jointly both stayed in a really nice hotel recently that was 10 times what they should have charged. The price and the quality were not equal, and we were both pissed about it, right? Your suits, the quality and the price, I actually think you get higher quality than the price you're paying. And so I think you and I have come together on wine, on food, on travel, on everything, that the quality and the price have to match for us, for it to make sense for us to make the purchase.
Yes.
Is that fair?
It is fair, but even more important as a teaching, here's what I've come to on this, that if you listen to your partner and where they're upset and you find a way to work to improve what you know to be a deficit in how you're approaching this, I believe that your partner will then support your weakness because you've recognized the weakness and you're trying to overcome. So
and vice versa. One more thing.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you this. We talked about how our parents raised us to have these blueprints. Now we have done the work. What are you doing specifically moving forward and how we're raising our daughters? I'm going to talk about what I'm doing, and I want you to talk about what you're doing specifically to raise them differently with a healthy money blueprint.
Well, I think the first thing would be that, to use your reference to David Bach's Latte Factor, I think the first thing is to pay yourself first. That she needs to understand for every, dollar that she makes, that, 15 or 20 cents of that dollar goes into a bank somewhere. To use your other reference with your DOM funds, that another 10 cents of that dollar should go into a blow it funds to keep that abundance mindset going. And then I think on the spending side, that there should be a looking at the price and looking at it through the lens of quality and not quantity, and think about, okay, well, this thing that you just bought that you really, really want, Is it of high quality? And is it something that you really, really want? And then I think the last thing is the bandwidth factor that you mentioned, which is our older daughter now is, she's doing really well. I got a text from her yesterday that her sale, I meant to tell you this, the sale of a deal that she just closed for a tech company that she's working at, moved them into, for the first time, it just so happens that it was her sale.
Yeah.
Moved them into, they had $20 million in revenue.
Wow.
And it was, they did a big...
With her sale.
It was her sale that brought them over the $20 million.
That's amazing.
And it was it was a big win for her. It was the whole team, obviously, that's doing it, but it was a big win for her. And she was so proud. And she's doing very well now financially. And the thing that I wish that I taught her, looking forward, is that there's a bandwidth that she's going to have to pay for the amount of money that she spends. So if she's going to go out and spend $10,000 on something, and the credit card bill comes in for the $10,000, okay, you're making money and you can spend it. But just know that there's a certain level of work that you have to do to pay that $10,000, and that level of work is taking you away from other experiences that you can be having in your life, like just simply more time off, because you've got to work to pay for it. Now, I will say, going back to my other friend that we talked about earlier, I don't feel like we closed the gap with him, which is the one that really, really spends a lot. He also really has to work a lot to be able to afford all of this because he's buying everything he wants, he has to continually be grinding to do all of those things. My other two friends don't work 50%, and in the other case, 90% of what he works, because they watch. So there's this balance of bandwidth versus spending. So the reason why I think fighting is so prevalent within couples with this is because it's not cut and dry. It's just not. There are so many variables that go in to these coaching conversations. So, all right, one quick takeaway from me, and then one quick takeaway from you.
I didn't get to go.
No, I didn't finish my... that wasn't my takeaway. So you can get your takeaway. That was just me talking.
Well, no, I asked you a question on how you would...
I answered that.
I know. I didn't get to answer it.
Oh, I thought you answered it.
I didn't get to answer it for how I would raise our daughters differently with a different financial blueprint. I didn't get to do that one yet. So I'm going to do it now because it was my question. I like the question. All right. So the one thing that I really did get from my parents was giving. And my parents are huge givers.
They are.
This is like, if there's one thing they do, is they give.
They give.
So I had started with our little one when she was little, a save, spend, give policy, where when she gets, let's say she gets $10, she has to put money into each of the 3 jars: save, spend, give. And then I read The Latte Factor. And I highly recommend David Bach, Latte Factor, that you read this book if you were like me and you weren't raised with like someone telling you to invest money and all of that, because that book triggered me to create some really solid choices financially for our family. One of which is Sophia now has an IRA. We both have IRAs, of course, but Sophia now has an IRA. And if you imagine maxing out an IRA starting at age 7 and where that will be when she's 40, 50, or 60 years old, that's just smart, right? That's just smart. So having her have this IRA, then understanding the save, pay yourself first, that goes into the IRA. Spend, that is from your side of the family with spending on and teaching her the quality matters and the work that's involved in the spend, and then the importance of giving. And so save, spend, give is going to be what I double down on with her, which is great because she and I just launched together our kids' gratitude journal. It's available on Amazon. We'll link it in the show notes. We have 4 different covers and we have some blank writing journals that can accompany them. But we created this journal together actually during the years of the pandemic to connect deeper and to practice gratitude in a time that felt really stressful. And we created the idea for this and the questions for this together. And she's made her first $150 from the sale of this gratitude journal. So what I'm going to have her do is go back to this save, spend, give policy and put 50, 50, and 50 and divide it equally in thirds so she can learn those three things from the very beginning.
It's really good. So much of this financial literacy comes from youth. I mean, everything we're talking about how you were raised.
Which is why we have to change it.
Okay, my takeaway would be in the form of a recommendation, which is I would read 2 books. If anything that we said today resonated for you either on the abundance side or on the lack side, I would read on the, I'm going to say lack, but I don't mean it, side. I would read The Millionaire Next Door, which was a Georgia, like University of Georgia or something, or Georgia Tech, one of those guys, professor who wrote the book. And he actually just did research on who were the millionaires. And he found that millionaires drive, the car that most millionaires drive is a Ford F-150. And they most of them live in a $200,000 house. And he took all of the illusions that you have of what a millionaire actually is like. And when you look at them, you realize that they are very, very different than you think they are. Now, on the other hand of the scale, I would look at the book recommendation that Kim mentioned, which is T. Harv Eker's book, The Millionaire Mindset. Because it's sort of the opposite of taking that thing that you got from your parents, money doesn't grow on trees, and really having an abundance mindset. And I think both of those books, you will find something in you that can either fortify what your strength is or reinforce the other. And if you are looking to strengthen the other side, which is have more experiences and be around, if you're somebody that's like, I have not been stepping into experiences, I have not been somebody that's stepping into abundance, and you like entrepreneurship, and if you are part of a couple, then you may want to join us. We're going to be stepping into a really abundant experience in the south of France, in Cannes. So if you want to be considered to be a part of our south of France mastermind, we'll have to change this URL soon because we changed the name of the podcast, but go to workhardplayhardpodcast.com and click on the mastermind link and fill out an application. We only take 8 couples, and it's not an easy job because we have to go through these applications and figure out who is the right couple to add the right value, to get the right value, to be a different kind of couple than the other couples there. So everybody can spend, 6 days together having an incredible experience, doing amazing things that you'll remember for the rest of your life. So if you go to workhardplayhardpodcast.com and click on Mastermind, you'll see some videos of previous events that we've done, and it will let you know whether or not this may or may not be for you.
All right. So I'm going to give you my last takeaway, and that is, don't let financial differences ruin your marriage. Do the work on yourself. Read T. Harv Eker, Secret of the Millionaire Mind, both of you. Make it a little mini couples book club and work on your own financial blueprint. Too often in marriage, you're trying to fix the other person. And although it does require sometimes pointing out the differences in the way you see things, it also takes you doing the work on you, because there is work to be done. And if you read that book, you will figure out your financial blueprint and where you're going wrong and how you can course correct and get back onto living in an abundant financial place, but also a place of financial literacy and being smart with your money, because we all want to do that, right? So don't let money ruin your marriage. Examine it for yourself, examine it together, and hopefully you can come together like we have and find a happy medium of compromise.
That's it, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Come grow together with us. Rate and review this podcast. This is one small way to show us some love and tell us that you value these conversations.
Leaving a 5-star review and written comment helps get this show into the ears of other couples just like you.